What if your enemy is your greatest teacher? I believe that's true. There's a stage along the hero's journey called enemies and allies. We've talked about the allies. Today, we're going to talk about the enemies, specifically how to deal with your enemies. If you are a high conflict person with low level skills, you probably have a lot of these. If you're chill with high level skills, you'll still have some because life gives us challenges to prompt us to grow. So listen to this episode all the way through, even if you think it doesn't apply to you, to gain some surprising thoughts to help you through the tough spots. And if you find it useful, subscribe. Fantasia gives tips for how to get through your own personal hero's journey without telling you what to do or think. Now, today's strategies come from one of history's most enduring thinkers, Marcus Aurelius. You may not know the name, but you know Marcus Aurelius. He was the emperor and general at the beginning of the movie Gladiator. So he was a real person. The rest of the story is not real, but he was a real person. And I love stories because it's easy to find lessons within them that we can apply to our own lives. So we're going to talk about Marcus Aurelius and Gladiator today so you can discover how to deal with enemies now. The enemy is typically something like injustice, betrayal, opposition, or personal sabotage. It's not usually a person. Quite often, the enemy is ourselves. And I invite you to look at how you are showing up and what your role is in this conflict because it's your personal hero's journey. It's really all about you, not who or what is against you, but how are you engaging with what's present. Now, Marcus Aurelius focuses on the inner battlefield and the idea that we must master ourselves first. For me, that's what Fantasia is about. That's what my hero's journey is about. Whether we are out to make our first million, recover from a broken heart, or to heal from lifetimes of generational trauma, the true goal is mastery over ourselves. If we put ourselves at the center of our lives and make each action about how did I show up, there's only one battle, if you want to call it that. It's the battle with ourselves to be completely authentic and show up who we are, where we are. And one of Marcus Aurelius' tactics is responding versus reacting. And if I had to guess, I'd say that Stoicism rose to prominence again after all of these years because of the movie Gladiator. In that movie, Aurelius is emperor. He is dying. He asks Maximus if he would take over as emperor if the Senate asked him to. Maximus says no. Instead of trying to persuade or forcing Maximus to agree, Aurelius says, "There once was a dream that was Rome. You could only whisper it. Anything more than a whisper and it would vanish." Rome obviously exists. He's talking that it's corrupt. It's no longer a glorious empire, and he would like to see the republic restored and believes Maximus is the person who can do that. Then Aurelius acknowledges his own shortcomings. He says, "I brought the sword, nothing more." He doesn't emotionally react to Rome's depravity. He doesn't cling to power or demand a dynasty by having his son take over from him. He doesn't manipulate Maximus, but he does plant a seed of redemption, and he does bring Maximus into his dream and makes him feel his faith in him to do more than Aurelius could. And that's when Maximus accepts. This is the power of the pause. No shots fired, no guilt tripping, no overpowering anybody. Everybody leaves with their dignity and authenticity intact. It's a brilliant maneuver and a perfect example of responding versus reacting. Compassion as a strength is another of Aurelius's tactics. I don't know if Maximus was a Stoic or not, but everyone who has seen this movie knows this scene because it's so powerful. Maximus is captured as a slave and is sold as a fighter in the arena. The gladiators are taken to the Colosseum, and Maximus is forced to fight a legendary gladiator, Tigress of Gaul, who was brought out of retirement to kill him. The crowd wants a good fight. Commodus, who is Aurelius' son and wants Maximus dead because his father loved Maximus more than he loved him, just wants to see him die spectacularly. But that's not what happens. Maximus defeats Tigress, disarms him, and is standing over him waiting for Commodus' signal to kill him. Commodus does it, but Maximus doesn't comply. It's a command by the emperor, and Maximus doesn't do it. And the crowd goes wild. In that moment, Commodus is humiliated, and Maximus is elevated to folk hero status for his mercy. And the crowd starts to chant, "Maximus the Merciful." So perhaps Maximus is a Stoic. He certainly has Aurelius' self-control. He doesn't become like his enemy. He just remains just. And when you see your enemy as human, as misguided, rather than an evil monster, compassion's easier. When you lose that, it's easy to become what you despise. And compassion's not a weakness. In this case, it's defiance, discipline, and dignity all rolled into one. It's acting from a space of values. It shows that true power is not measured by what you could do, but what you choose not to do. The loser doesn't have the option of giving mercy, only the powerful do. Another of Marcus Aurelius' strategies for dealing with enemies was to foresee adversity calmly. Aurelius felt that suffering doesn't come from the events themselves, but from the emotional shock of things not going the way that we hoped. Mentally rehearsing gives you space to figure out what to do if you're faced with a thing you don't want to happen. And it also makes it not shocking because you've already been there in your mind with a calm body. And this part's really important. The difference between somebody reliving a traumatized event who's healed and one who isn't is that the healed person does it in a calm body. Now, this can be tricky if the person is dissociated. If you're not in your body, it can feel like you're calm because you aren't feeling anything. And if you want an accurate assessment of your level of healing, you have to be embodied. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius talks about coping ahead with these two quotes. Begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. And if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. So this enemy isn't someone out there. It's definitely in your own mind. And you don't have to be fearless to defeat it. You just have to be ready and willing. So another way to deal with your enemies that Aurelius talks about in Meditations is reframing. Instead of seeing enemies as threats, bad luck, payback, haters, or whatever, he sees them as part of the natural order, like storms or illness. It's not personal. Y'all know the movie. In the last showdown between Maximus and Commodus, Commodus goes to see Maximus, who's chained up, and he shanks him in the guts. And Maximus is a soldier. He knows the difference between a flesh wound and something serious. And he also knows he still has to get out there and fight Commodus in the arena. Maximus isn't acting like a victim. He has no bitterness or hate. He accepts that this is the natural order of things. He still has a job to do, and this is just part of it. It's really important to be where we are and who we are. Resisting reality is a waste of time. Commodus isn't his enemy. He's not a villain who's out to get him. He's just the force that has to be dealt with. And this gives Maximus peace, clarity, calm, and a sense of inner victory, win, lose, or draw. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius says, to expect bad men to do no wrong is madness. It is to expect figs not to bear juice. It is what it is. We all have the choice and the power to see enemies as enemies, or we can see them as part of our challenges to make life interesting and keep us growing. So this is not about these two hating each other, at least not for Maximus. He fights Commodus because that is what the moment is asking of him. Commodus isn't the emperor, an enemy, or a monster. He's just another wave in the sea of life, one that Maximus rides with dignity. Another strategy from Aurelius's playbook for how to defeat your enemies is to cultivate inner strength and wisdom. We've seen that in all the examples that I've talked about so far from Gladiator, but for this tactic, I want to turn to Lucilla, who is her father's daughter through and through. Lucilla's a tough woman who embodies her father's vision to restore Rome as a republic, but she has a disadvantage of being born a woman. She's far more capable than her brother Commodus and a lot more wise. And she needs it because she doesn't have access to armies or swords or big audiences to hear her speeches. Her strength lies in her restraint, clarity, and courage under pressure. Y'all remember the busy little bee scene? Commodus is obsessed with Lucilla. He loves her, but he's becoming paranoid that everyone's out to get him, including her. Lucilla's walking on eggshells, trying not to ignite his anger while still remaining true to herself, Maximus, and the Senate. Commodus says to her, "You're lying. I know when you're lying because you're bad at it." And she does something unexpected. She tells the truth. She says, "I've always loved you, and I've always been afraid of you." She doesn't scream, plead, grovel, or try to lie her way out of it. And because she leans into the truth, she diffuses the tension rather than escalates it. She knows she's on a razor's edge. and she maintains emotional control, speaks strategically, and plays the long game. If Lucilla's fear had gotten the best of her, Commodus would have either locked her up, killed her, or done something that would have disempowered her. But Lucilla was wise. She kept her freedom and her life. Another tip from meditations is to practice emotional detachment. We see that over and over from Maximus and Lucilla. The whole movie engages our feelings, but one of the most stirring moments of the movie happens in the Gladiator living area. Maximus is looking at the small figurines of his deceased wife and child. He's been grieving them since he found out that they were murdered. He's clearly emotional, but he's not sinking into despair or getting lost in vengeance. Juba says, "You will see them again, but not yet." And Maximus responds, "Not yet." He accepts the pain and the death. He just allows it to be without allowing it to dominate his thoughts or actions. A lot of people think that detachment means to not feel, and that's not what this is. Maximus feels. He's not cold. He's rolling with it. He's not letting himself be ruled by sadness or loss. This acceptance gives him clarity, dignity, and power to bear what would otherwise be unbearable. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius says, "You may leave this life at any moment. Have this possibility in your mind in all that you do or say or think." Maximus does this. He doesn't fear death. He integrates it. It's so powerful. His mission isn't about clinging to life or denying death. His life is about acting with purpose while he's above ground. When we become consumed with anger, sadness, or emotions, we can become cruel, chaotic, bitter, or manic. We become puppets to our emotions, and emotional detachment sets us free. Another tip for how to deal with your enemies is to choose your battles wisely. And this can be about who to fight, when to fight, or how to fight. Early in Maximus's gladiator career, it might have been his second fight, I think. His team is sent out into the arena not knowing what they're going to face. And they're meant to play the losing side of a battle of Zama, the reenactment. And Maximus is a general. He took over and he told the other fighters, "Whatever comes out of those gates, we have a better chance of survival if we work together. Do you understand? If we stay together, we survive." Now, he doesn't have a choice about whether to fight, but he does have a choice how to fight. So rather than letting Commodus or other fighters dictate how the show is going to happen, he looks at what is within his control and organizes a strategic defense. So working as a team is not how gladiators fought. That's how armies fought. And that is what allowed them to taste victory. His team wins. The crowd goes wild, and Maximus starts on a path of being a public hero. Our modern day battles are things like traffic, not having enough money for what we want, and wishing for more recognition or connection. Choose your battles. Those aren't real enemies. We can use reframing, which is the skill I talked about before, to let go of those battles. These types of things are battles with ourselves. They're illusions. Another strategy from Marcus Aurelius for how to deal with your enemies can help with that. And this one is about cultivating positive relationships. So Maximus was saved by Juba, the Numidian gladiator who knew how to treat his infection in his arm that otherwise surely would have killed him. They had the shared experience of being fighters and captives and bonded over that. In the scene that I talked about earlier, where Maximus is looking at the figures of his deceased wife and son, Juba gets it. They're both in a place that strips men of their dignity and humanity. But in that small exchange, they see it in each other. Those are the types of moments that allow all of us to maintain vulnerability and connection with our spiritual center. The more I know about trauma, the more that I believe this is the most important thing that we all do for each other. We can either ignore each other and not see each other, in which case it's almost like we disappear, and then things like war, child abuse, murder, and sex trafficking can happen. Or we can see each other, and things like family, true friendships, and romance versus hookups can happen. When we're living in fear, everything's about survival. When we're living in connection, life becomes about the survival of the community and the shared expression of love. When I first saw Gladiator, I couldn't watch it. I had to step out because it was the most violent movie I'd ever seen. But Gladiator isn't just about vengeance or hate or power. It's about connection in chaos. Aurelius knew, and Maximus said in the arena, that humans are designed to work together. In Meditations, Aurelius says, we are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. To act against one another, then, is contrary to nature. So being cooperative and connected is part of your nature. I don't know how any war can be fought when we are in that space. To harm someone else is to harm yourself. I think most people want to belong, and if given a safe way to do that, they will. Nobody wants to fight unless they have to. I think all of meditations can be used as a guide for how to deal with your enemies, but I want to highlight one more strategy, and that's silence. This is not your typical battling tool, huh? At the beginning of the movie, Commodus orders Maximus to be killed, and Maximus was his only real threat to the throne. And Maximus is not on Commodus's mind at all because he thought he was dead. But after Maximus's first gladiator battle in the arena, Commodus wants to know who is this spectacular new fighter, and he asks him to remove his helmet. Maximus doesn't move. He stands in silence. Then he slowly turns and says nothing. The whole crowd is watching. This is strange and unusual. What's happening? Commodus speaks first and says, "Your name, slave?" And Maximus responds slowly and deliberately, "My name is Maximus Decimus Meridian, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next." Yikes. That landed. That landed with the crowd and with Commodus. There's no drama, but you can see who has power over whom. Maximus is a slave, and yet he dominated Commodus without using any violence at all. In Meditations, Aurelius says, be like the rock against which the waves crash, standing firm, and the raging of the sea falls still around you. And that's what Maximus did. He was still, conscious, and self-possessed. He didn't argue, explain, or rage. In his silence and then calm, he spoke louder than his rage ever could. You know what? We live in a world where everything is screaming at us all the time, trying to get our attention. It's a soundbite, influencer world where distraction and reaction is normal. Be the opposite. Be unshaken. Stand firm in your presence without any noise and watch how the world takes notice. How this works practically is that people get unnerved when they're being loud and intense and you refuse to engage in petty arguments or confrontations. It leaves a void that goes unfilled, so they either have to meet you where you are or go find someone else who will engage with them at that level. Silence can be disarming. It can create a space where the person who is directing attacks or making commands has a space to do some self-examination. I talked about zooming out earlier. That's a good thing. Perhaps things never were as dramatic as you thought. Or maybe they catch a breather and they can calm down to where they can be heard. Now, sometimes silence is a trauma response. I'm not talking about that. Some people are conflict avoiders. They refuse to engage in conflict, but they also don't participate in problem solving. So it's very difficult to move forward or know where you stand with these people. They aren't honest. They don't participate. This is not what I'm talking about. Silence as a strategy is mindful. It's a choice to be still. It's not a retreat. It's a presence. Rather than lashing out or caving in, it's a standing still in your power. It's a very different thing. So I just don't want there to be any confusion. So I've given you 9 strategies from Marcus Aurelius on how to deal with your enemies. So responding versus reacting, using compassion as a strength, coping ahead, reframing, cultivating inner wisdom and strength, practicing emotional detachment, choose your battles wisely, cultivate positive relationships, and silence. Notice that all of the things are preparations for battle, just like a military battle. It's what you do before the engagement that determines victory or defeat. Preparation is everything. Another thing that pops out at me is that none of the strategies involves actually going on the offensive. All of those are things you can do yourself without involving another person. So what does that tell you? Perhaps that most of the battles and enemies are made up. They aren't even problems at all. So they're things that can be fixed by changing your mind, or they're things that we don't need to fight over. If we apply some wisdom and compassion, they just go away. So let's test this out. Think of something or someone that you'd call an enemy. Now, what would happen if you stopped needing to win and started needing to understand? What happens if you say, this is just a part of life, not a disaster trying to take me down? Lean into that. What can this enemy teach you about yourself? What does your response say about you? I do a version of this with most of my clients, and those who are open and vulnerable and willing always find a way to either become more flexible and see how they contribute to the issue. So if you are stuck in a victim mode, vengeance mode, or even attack mode, ask yourself, what would it take to feel safe? Focus on that. Love to hear your thoughts about how to deal with your enemies. Let me know your favorite Gladiator moments or Marcus Aurelius quotes. You can pick up his book, Meditations, and adapt every strategy, or you can practice self-reflection. Aurelius came up with all these great insights because he was a conscious being. He wrote Meditations as his journal while on campaign. He reviewed his day and mused about what worked and what didn't. When something didn't work, he tweaked until he did. So he learned mastery through experience. That's what we're doing in my private group. We are consciously experiencing life and learning from it the way the child learns. We're not intellectualizing it or following someone else's path. And if you want to become a life master rather than a follower, you're welcome to join. Links in the show notes. See you guys next week. Appreciate you being here.
Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Spotify so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, why not show your love with a review? Thanks. See you next week.